synergies that allow you to be some of your best self, so that energy really isn't an issue. It just flows out of you, like I feel every day. I don't
Yep.
that age old saying of, I don't work a day in my life. I love what I do. My guest today is Adam Barney, and he's spent over 20 years inside global companies, manage hundreds of millions in ad spend, and then he decided to walk away to manage his own coaching practice to actually lift up the individual. His whole approach sits on one idea. It's really about exhaustion. That successful men call burnout is actually debt, and how you're not managing it. And in my world, that debt is on your waistline, and his is decision fatigue, burnout, just this maybe even dread of going into work or doing the things that you need to. So we're
Right.
going to be uncovering a lot today in our conversation, and Adam is going to bring a lot to the conversation. Welcome, Adam. Thanks for coming on.
I am excited to be here, Brian. This is going to be a fun one.
Yeah.
I'm genuinely looking forward to it because I think your audience and my work overlap in a way that most people actually probably wouldn't expect at face value.
Right, definitely. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I know this is the 130th episode for Driven Proud podcast, but I had done so many solo episodes and I said, you know what? I'm going to start bringing on subject matter experts and start expanding opportunities, because there has to be an intersection of where health and business and family and relationships and all these other areas of life, they intersect. And we will go over that, like that concept of ikigai, where there's these overlapping circles of what makes you you, and that's so important. So bringing you on is a joy for me, and I hope that the listeners are getting a lot out of it, because the guys, they want to perform, they want to succeed in what they define as success.
Right, right, right. Yep, yep.
Well,
Well,
what
and,
is
and I
health
mean,
for you? God.
I think, just to kick things off a little bit on this sort of energy debt idea, to kind of back it up a little bit, though, when people hear that I'm a leadership coach, I think that they and our listeners probably immediately picture that I'm standing in boardrooms, right? And in strategy
Right.
sessions and with executives in suits. And sure, that's part of what I do. But
Right.
underneath it all, I'm really in the business of just helping people get their lives back. And that's what energy debt means, right? Because
Right.
here's what I've really noticed over 5 years of building this is the people I coach are not anywhere close to lazy, right? They're not unmotivated.
Oh, not at
They're
all.
actually some of the highest performers, hardest working people I've ever met, right? They're founders, executives, leaders, they're parents. They're the people
Hmm.
everyone else in their orbit depends on, and yet they're exhausted in the middle. So
Right.
that's where that energy debt comes in. It's not because they aren't capable, it's because they're simply carrying too much. And I think that's actually become one of the defining health challenges of where we are right now in our generation.
Totally. And even one of the huge reasons why in recent time I've shifted toward 40-year-old men or older is I'm 43 and I'm feeling the pinch of life all of a sudden, of growing kids, aging parents, more responsibilities. We have all this things. Ownership creates a lot of responsibilities, and like my
Yep.
hot tub, I had to fix the control panel. I didn't want to. It was 150
Right.
bucks. I'm like, and a bunch of time that I go figure out how to do the thing. I'm like, oh my gosh. And it's just something else. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of guys are feeling that, and that something else overtakes their ability or their time to take care of themselves, because,
Right.
oh, well, tonight after work, I have to go fix the hot tub control panel. So
Right.
I'm going to skip my gym workout or whatever. And that builds up, and we need to burn energy to
Yep.
manage the energy debt that we're accumulating in all these other generally stressful life
Yep.
situations.
Well, and Brian, I go back to my corporate career, right? I spent 20 years in corporate marketing across, companies like Microsoft, Digitas, Akamai. I
Hmm.
managed, as you said, over $100 million in
Right.
advertising spend. I led teams. I hit quotas. I climbed the what I now believe is a false ladder. On paper, I was doing everything I thought I was supposed to do. And if you had asked me back then if I was successful, I actually probably would have said yes.
Right.
But if you had asked me if I was healthy, I don't think I would have even known how to answer that question, right?
Right.
I probably would have immediately gone to, well, I could probably lose a few pounds, or I should probably work out more. But what I wouldn't have said was I'm mentally exhausted, or my
Right.
calendar owns me, or I don't know how to stop.
Right.
And I think really I've become really good at producing, but not very good at recovering. And,
Right.
looking back, this is the case of one where I started here. I don't think I was managing my energy at all. I was just spending it.
Right, right. And you have a big concept around. We'll start with the energy balance first, is and debt. Let's define that a little bit more so that guys understand exactly
Yeah.
what that means to them.
Well, can I back up maybe just for a
Yeah, totally.
and also, I think you talked about this a little bit in terms of how life changes over time, right? And I'm
Oh yeah.
sure a lot of our listeners in that realm of men over 40 have realized that, because life has a funny way of interrupting, let's say, the stories we tell ourselves. In that
Right.
corporate journey, I got laid off, and I'll be transparent about that. It wasn't once, it was twice. I
Ah,
remember vividly thinking, if my identity can disappear because someone I've never met actually changed an org chart, maybe I've built my identity on something that was never mine to
wow.
begin with, right? And that
Right.
question stayed with me. Who am I without the title? Who am I
Right.
without the business card? Who am I when
Right.
no one's applauding? And honestly, Brian, I think every human, but especially modern men, eventually have to answer that question.
Yes.
Sometimes
Right.
it's retirement, sometimes it's losing a job,
When
sometimes,
things slow down,
yeah.
you get
Well,
slapped in the face
I
of
mean, yeah,
what's going
sometimes it
on.
can be a divorce, it could be a health scare, it could
Right.
becoming a dad, right? Eventually forces the question.
Right, right. Now that's huge because and in any of those situations, life is pulling you back in a sense and trying to seek out some level of balance then
Yep.
because you have to address it because you went to work 60 hours plus a week and now you don't have that.
Yeah.
How do you fill your time and who are you as a person to then what is it that you actually do? And that's where I even say midlife crisis
Right.
is happening. Whereas you spend so much time and energy in a corporate false ladder in a sense. And I think a lot of guys could probably resonate with
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
because you are ultimately building someone else's dream and whatnot and getting paid for it, but not to the degree at which they you and I are both are building our
Yeah.
own things, but yeah, it ends up slowing this. The cost of slowing down really then forces you to reevaluate who you are as a
Yeah.
person.
Well, and I think I started realizing that almost everything I'd been taught about success had left out that really important ingredient of energy. Energy is an excitement, it's not motivation. Energy, is what it is because motivation even comes and goes. Energy is what allows you to
Right.
show up when motivation isn't there. And I realized that no one had ever taught me how to manage it. Even though I'd read books on productivity, on time management,
Right.
leadership, marketing, sales, negotiation, influence, no one had ever taught me how to protect the thing that made each of those possible. And I think that's especially true for men. We're told to push, we're told to
Very
provide,
much
to
so.
produce, to perform, to just keep going.
Yep.
We celebrate the grind, wear exhaustion like a badge of honor.
Yep.
But somewhere along the
Guilty as
way,
charged. I will also say that I have self-identified with those characteristics or have done those things from sleeping 4 hours a night when I had a gym back in 2011 to just always working to like all these things. Yeah,
well,
totally
and then
feel that.
somewhere along the way, being tired becomes the proof that you were working hard enough, right? Because
Right, right,
the problem here is your body doesn't care about your LinkedIn profile or your bank account, but it keeps
right.
it keeps score anyway, rather, and it eventually it actually starts whispering, right? You just meant you don't sleep as well. You're shorter with your kids. You stop calling your friends. You gain a little weight. Patience gets thinner, and you're constantly saying, after this project, XYZ, I'll take care of myself. But
Right.
then after that project comes another project and another and another.
There's always something else, right?
Well, then one day you wake up and realize you've spent years postponing your life. And I think that's one of the biggest lies people tell themselves also, is that I'll take care of myself after, right?
Oh, I see that so many times when people show up on my doorstep because they are in some form of poor health and they had just not taken care of themselves.
Right.
And it shows up in all sorts of ways, from the obvious being overweight, but chronic illness, diabetes, cholesterol, blood pressure. They're on medicine. I have two guys right now that are dealing with stage 3 kidney
Wow.
disease, chronic kidney disease. And some of it is from both of them. Two common themes is that they barely drink water. Your kidneys are a filtration device in your body. And by naturally,
Good,
if they
good,
literally doubled
great
their
reminder
water,
right there. Yeah.
right here, cheers to water, right? But now this is obvious, but we can't put our finger on it. But if they would have doubled their water intake for decades,
Yep.
maybe their kidneys wouldn't be so strained because
Right.
they're both in their 60s.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, we could go out on a limb and assume, certainly assuming is one thing or another, but we could probably deduct that, hey, if you actually drank water, and both of them were overweight by a lot at
Yep.
one point in their life as well. So there's all these telltale things that ultimately, when we look back, we can see why they are where they're at now, unfortunately.
Yep.
And so again, this isn't we're not doctors, and we can't diagnose or say that one thing caused
Well,
anything like that. Just going to throw that out there.
no,
So
no, but it's always this idea of like I'll do it after the promotion, after the kids
yes,
get older, after we
right,
buy the house, after this
right,
quarter, after this launch. And the big problem is the fact that after never arrives.
never.
Life just keeps naturally asking for more, you know,
Yep,
so eventually you actually have to stop asking when life is going to slow down and start
right,
asking, how do I become the kind of person who can stay healthy while life stays
right,
busy? And that's a completely different question, and that's
right,
become my life's work.
right. Tomorrow's always tomorrow.
Right.
It's never today.
Right.
Right.
But
And
but but
I
you know,
will.
but Brian, don't get me wrong, like nutrition matters, movement
Of
matters,
course.
sleep matters,
Right.
hydration matters. They're foundational. But I think we've accidentally treated health like it's a collection of habits instead of an operating system. And I would say
Right.
for the listeners here, think about your phone for a second. You know, if your operating system on that phone is corrupted, it doesn't matter how many great apps you install. They're
Right.
all running on unstable software. And I think
Right.
people are exactly the same way. You know, you
Hmm.
download another productivity app, you buy another planner, start another diet, listen to another podcast, pun
Right.
completely intended. But if the operating system underneath all of it is exhausted, nothing sticks.
Right.
And that's then about people rebuilding from the inside out. You know, sustainable health isn't just about what you eat, it's about how you lead yourself.
Of course. Definitely, definitely. And change is the only constant that we have. Even right now, I always love to bring this up. We're about 14 minutes into the show. We haven't moved, right? We are locked in front of the cameras and our mics. But if we zoom out to like a 1,000-mile radius, we moved a lot. This
Right,
Earth has been spinning around in orbit, and
right,
it's constantly changing the our actual physical location in time and space.
right.
So it is by constant change and then being able to adapt around it. Those are some of the true things that people just aren't paying attention. And a lot of people are
Yeah,
scared of change, or they don't want change, or they get comfortable and they don't want to evolve or be lean and agile with whatever the situation is.
right.
Even that's what this podcast came out of, is like, shoot, I've got an open day. I need to do something with it. And I literally at 8:15 in the morning sat down and figured out how to do a podcast. And by
Yep,
midnight, I was posting my first podcast on Apple.
yep.
And I was like, yay, I did
Right,
it.
right. But I mean, kind of like bring it back to like an almost an operating system level. And you know,
Right.
you mentioned Ikigai before.
Yeah. Let's
And
jump in.
I'll be honest, Brian. You know, this all started because I fell in love with Ikigai years ago. You know, and for
Yeah.
anyone who hasn't seen it before, it's a Japanese framework that's often described as helping you find purpose through four simple questions. But I mention that now because that's the part that should ground you through all of this change, right? It's
Right.
what do you love? What are you good at? What does the world need? And what can you be paid for? And when I first saw it, I remember thinking this is beautiful, right?
Yeah.
For the first time, it acknowledged for me that fulfillment isn't just about money, it's actually about internal alignment. So,
Right.
I started
Right.
using it with coaching clients, and then something interestingly happened. I'd have founders sitting across from me or executives who loved what they did. They were phenomenal at it. Their clients desperately needed their work. They were making more money than they'd ever imagined, and they were completely burned out. I
Hmm.
remember thinking, wait a second, according to the framework, everything should be working, but it wasn't.
Right.
So instead of me going and asking, what's wrong with these people, which is the right question, I started asking might the framework actually be missing. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons coaching has taught me. Whenever reality and the framework disagree, trust reality. The framework needs to evolve and not the person.
Right. Right. Yep.
And
The
Ikigai, Brian, though, has really transitioned into what I now am calling the Energy OS alignment framework. And
mhm.
and what changed for me from that original Ikigai was adding one really important dimension, and that's sustainability, because that's what Oh
Well,
man,
a little
this
technical difficulty, but here we are.
one, this is a different one here. Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
Our
no worries.
it's funny, Brian. Talk about unexpected things that happen.
Yep.
Our power went off in the middle of this, but it also went off in the middle of the night last night. So
Yeah, it's that heat that you got over there in Boston.
I think it
It's
is the
wearing
heat
on the
here in
it's
Boston.
wearing on the energy system of
It's a great
electricity and the
example
power grid.
though of how this works, right?
Yes, exactly. And we have to adapt
Yep.
because change is
Yep.
constant. So here we are. You're what, on your
Change
phone
is
now?
change is constant. My monitor stopped working. There we go. But I'm back. I am back on the
Yep.
hotspot.
Yep. So we were talking about Ikigai and where all of these areas meet and what
Yep.
is important. You are in front of a wide variety of people, and
Right.
they're not in alignment. They're doing really and on paper, again, successful on paper, but their alignment inside,
Yep.
there's a lot of friction happening with how they're taking care of themselves and all that.
Right. Well, and I think I was talking about sustainability, right?
Right.
When we ran into that tech hiccup, like someone could absolutely love their work but never sleep.
Right.
Someone could be incredibly talented, but their marriage could be struggling. Someone could be making fantastic money, but the anxiety was through the roof. And also
I've
you could
seen
be
that a
just
lot.
making a huge impact, but quietly wondering how much longer you can keep doing it. And to me, that's not alignment. That's actually survival. So,
Right.
I've sort of redefined the way I think about alignment here, because when four things overlap, what energizes you, what you're genuinely gifted at, what creates meaningful impact for other people, and what actually sustains your life, that really hits the nail on the head. And it's not
Right.
just financially, it's emotionally, it's physically, it's relationally, it's spiritually. And if your career is costing your health, the way I look at it is it's too expensive, right? And if your ambition
Very much.
is costing your family, it's too expensive.
I mean, let's think about it. A out-of-pocket expense on a heart attack is 6 figures.
Wow.
You have to be doing pretty darn well at work to
Yep.
be able to just outright pay for that.
Right.
Where insurance aside,
Yep.
but then the not the financial hardship, but the
Yep.
physical hardship that comes from being a heart attack survivor, hopefully,
Right.
because it could not end that way, right? You might die as well,
Yep.
which is catastrophic, obviously. But
Well,
I've had some people be fine, and others they get wrecked in a
Yeah.
really bad way.
Well, and I think this is where it's especially relevant for the audience here today. So many men in these modern times have become incredibly good providers, but somewhere along the way stopped asking, what is that success actually costing me?
Right. Right. What's the trade-off here?
Right. And obviously they're not failing, but they're just succeeding by someone else's scorecard. I did that for years. I measured my own worth by promotions, by titles, by raises, performance reviews, the size of the team, the size of the budget. And here's what the funny part is. Every time I hit the next milestone, it felt good, but only for about 2 days, right? Because then the goalposts move.
Goalposts.
There's always another mountain. There's always another target. There's always another expectation. And I don't see that as just ambition, actually. That's addiction to external validation. And that's a big difference there.
Yeah, huge difference. Very much.
And one question I love to actually ask my clients these days is, if I took away your LinkedIn headline, who are you? Right? Yes. And usually that brings people to be really quiet, because most of us have spent the decades answering the question, what do you do? But very few have spent time answering, who are you becoming? And that's why I think health absolutely has to include identity. You can't separate the two.
Right.
If your identity depends entirely on performance, every minor setback becomes a threat, and every missed goal feels personal, or every layoff feels like you failed as a human being. And of course, I've lived that twice, And when I got laid off the second time, I remember actually realizing something that sounds obvious now, but truly changed my perspective. Companies make business decisions people make identity decisions. And I think a lot of leaders out there accidentally tie those two things together. The company wasn't deciding my worth. I was. And that gave me an incredible amount of freedom, because if I stopped outsourcing the identity that I have, I could finally start to work to build it intentionally.
Right. I'll even volunteer myself. I identify being a provider, literally in my brain. That's what I am. And I have season of super busy work and seasons of not. And in
Yep.
those seasons of not, if I'm not like bringing in the paycheck or making as much money as I have in the past or any of that, I have more free time. And so we
Yep.
talk about that slowing down. And of course, I show up for my family like
Yep.
crazy. I'm at every event. I drop to even we have a 2-week kids camp for theater that we're
Yep.
sending them to. I'm dropping them off. I'm picking them up every day at 9 and 4. So, and then I'm doing other
Yep.
things with my kids and family as well. So I show up, but I started to even a slower season of work. It's like, who
Yep.
am I? Especially to say, like my wife and
Right.
all, or how I provide money, but how else do I show up besides just
Right.
being a taxi service as well
Right.
in my family?
Right.
And that's a challenging question to have. And you
Well,
do feel less than if you don't have a good answer or solution in that scenario.
Well, I think that's actually a great point to go into something here, right? Because I think it's a great example that shows that people start in the wrong place.
Yeah.
A lot of people ask, what should I add? They automatically go to another
Ah,
habit, another app,
right.
another morning routine, another supplement, or a different productivity
Right.
system. And I actually love to probe the opposite question. What needs or what can come off your plate? Most people don't have an effort deficit, they have an elimination deficit. You carry commitments you don't believe in anymore, whether it's relationships you've outgrown,
Right.
expectations you've carried along too long, meetings that don't matter, and or even guilt that isn't theirs. And
Mhm.
sometimes the actual healthiest thing you can do isn't adding something, it's giving yourself permission to stop carrying something, and that creates
That's 100%.
space. And once
Yep.
you have space, energy tends to come back.
Yeah, let's talk about that space thing. I believe that's a huge component of coaching. And I
Yep.
see it in my world, and you probably do as yours. We slow down to start focusing on this area
Yep.
of whatever your focus is. So for me, a huge amount of nutrition goes into the work that I do. I
Yep.
get people to stop, take a picture of what you're eating and send it to me. Why?
Right.
Because it's a pattern interrupt. It causes you to not just mindlessly put food in your mouth. You have to stop and think and address the situation of, is this moving me toward my goals or away from my goals? And
Right.
these slowing down to simplify, and that's a
Yep.
huge component of what I do too, is how do we make this easier? Constant question I'm always asking me is the simplicity paradox of how do we
Yep.
make it easier for you to implement in simple strategies around just again nutrition,
Yep.
picking a low fat protein, picking lots of vegetables, some healthy fruit, a little bit of starch, and having a
Yep.
balanced plate of about 500 calories. If you do that the rest of your life, you won't have weight issues. I promise you. It just
Right.
doesn't happen because that's how the human body, especially the male human body, operates. And you will have plenty of energy, and you'll actually probably feel a lot better than the
Right.
garbage you're probably putting in your mouth
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I would bring it back to something I mentioned earlier. One thing I tell clients all the time is, think of how good we are at protecting our cell phones again, right?
Oh my gosh. I know
We
where my cell phone is at all
but
times. Here it
we
is.
charge them every night. We'll update the
Uh-huh.
software the second that pop-up comes. We change the
Right.
battery. We panic if it drops below 20%, but then
Yes.
we run ourselves at 3% battery life for 6 months. And
Right.
somehow that's the normal we live in, and it shouldn't be,
Right. It
because,
shouldn't be.
unlike those phones that we all carry, we don't get a notification before we crash.
No, we do
Our
not. Well,
spouse
there are
notices
warning
first.
signs, but you're so blind to them.
Yeah.
Hey, why are you having Like third pot of coffee today.
Right.
Right?
Well, and that's where our partners, our spouses notice, our
Yeah.
kids notice, our
Right.
coworkers notice.
Right. Yep.
You know,
And then
in
you
our
don't want to
body,
hear it. They're just nagging you.
and
So,
even our body starts to notice, and
yes.
we usually up here notice last. And
Yes.
that's the part I work on to help people avoid, right? Is that
Right.
being the last thing you focus on.
Right. Right. Actually, this morning I had to say no to my son. I didn't want to, but tomorrow we're going to go a long run. I'm training for a marathon to race my oldest Levi at the Akron Marathon in September. I have 77 days left, which is crazy because I started the countdown timer at 250 or something like
Yep.
that,
Yep.
248.
Yep.
So I'm running out of time. But
Right.
my second son, Everett, he's running cross country. He woke up before the theater camp today and he said, I'm going to run in the morning. Do you want to join me? And it was just 3 miles, but I had to say no because I
Yep.
did 5 miles yesterday and I biked 2 hours.
Right.
And I need to make sure that I can run a long run on Saturday, which I will be running with him
Yep.
tomorrow. So I had to say no today because I just, my body, I'm 43. It's just
You
not going to
needed
work.
you needed to recover. You
Yeah,
needed to
I needed to
recharge
recover.
that
And I
battery.
slept probably an extra hour as a result of not waking up because he
Yep.
also has been getting me up on Tuesday,
Yep.
Thursday mornings. And then we woke up early on Wednesday, earlier than I would have. So we were waking up at say 8 o'clock normally, but I was getting up at 6:30 to be able to
Wow.
go run with them on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So we have to then energy debt. I had to say no to the
Yep.
offer of working, running with them. I did give him an option. I said, if I wake up and I'm up, then I will run with you. But I slept till like 8:08. So I was like
Wow.
a snooze button fast when I was
Yep.
supposed to wake up or something.
Right. 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 Well, that's a great place, I think, to get into a little bit more about energy debt, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the idea I've been thinking about most lately. You know, everyone, especially our listeners here, understand financial debt. You know, if I
Yes.
borrow
Very much
money
so.
today, eventually somebody expects to be paid
Yep.
back, and it's usually with interest.
Yep.
That energy works exactly the same way. The only difference is most of us don't realize we're borrowing. You know, every night maybe you're sacrificing sleep because I'll catch up this weekend. You're
Right.
borrowing. Every
I just
time you
got to
skip
watch
the
this last episode
right,
of whatever to
every time
de-stress.
you skip the workout because work feels more important. Every difficult conversation you avoid. Every vacation where you're still checking email. It's the middle of the
Right.
summer, right? So
Right.
or
Right.
every time again, you know, every time you tell yourself I'll deal with that later, you're borrowing. And eventually the interest comes due. You know, we give it different names: burnout, brain fog, irritability, weight gain, high blood pressure, feeling disconnected from your partner or your spouse, feeling like you don't
Right.
recognize yourself in the mirror anymore. And none of those things happen overnight, right? They're often the interest payments on years of that accumulated energy debt.
Yeah, very much so. Even I want to throw this in here too. You talked about financial debt. Everybody understands that, and in my world, the relationship would be a calorie debt. You have
Mhm.
accumulated this calorie excess, and it shows up on your waistline or your double chin, and in your blood
Yep.
panels from years of just making not the best choice, or skipping lunch and then overeating
Right.
later, or stressed out and you eat something else, and so we have to find ways to pay off this energy excess that we have and calorie, what I would call calorie credit card debt. We keep borrowing from tomorrow.
Ooh.
I'm just going to eat. I'm just
Yeah.
going to eat a little bit more today and I'll eat less tomorrow. Well, that's
Right.
borrowing from tomorrow. Just
Right.
like financial debt is like, I'll just spend a little bit more and I'll spend less tomorrow. That's not how humans work.
Right.
So that
Well,
resonates quite a bit with what I
in
talk about.
this kind of, Brian, it changed the way that I think about my own life. You know, I
Yeah.
used to think I needed better discipline. I now
Uh-huh.
realize I needed better awareness. That's a huge
Big
difference, right?
difference.
Discipline is saying push harder, where awareness asks, why am I running on empty in the first place? And those are completely different conversations.
Very much so. Very, very much so. Now, how does Ikigai fall into this energy debt balance and the your energy OS?
I mean, it's the start of it, right? It's one of these simple tools, and I'm a fan of more simple tools, especially in this
Yeah.
modern world, because of that complexity we need. We need, but to get into, sort of understanding where energy is leaking, it starts with that Energy OS alignment framework. And,
Yeah.
it's how I look at it, and it's inspired again by Ikigai, is it's what energizes you, what you're great at, what others
Right.
need, and what sustains you. And then the center of that is a plugged in state for that energy rebuilding. And
Right.
when energy strengths, impact, and sustainability align, leaders end up operating with greater clarity, resilience, and purpose. And
Right.
that's the easiest way. So, I have a framework I can put, with the show notes here to
Yep.
showcase how to do this, but it's really just a 4 concentric circle with 1 circle in the middle exercise.
Right.
Draw it on a blank piece of paper next to you or in your notebook, and then fill in each of those 4 corners, and the things that overlap into the middle. That's the center of the Ikigai, or the center of your Energy OS system.
Right. Right. Once you align with some of the inner dealings of who you are, that's one of the pillars. I have 2 strong pillars in the Call to Rise program. We have
Sure.
identity. It's the call pillar, that's your identity, and the code is your mindset. These
Yep.
are super important in redefining who you are, so we get more ikigai going on into your world,
Yep.
because oftentimes I'll run into a lot of guys that are out of alignment,
Right.
especially with their nutrition, their health, because they aren't in alignment with what they do every single day. They
Yep.
show up at work and they don't
Yeah.
like that. They don't have great relationships, or they don't know how to manage or foster those. And it's a lot, oftentimes it's a skill set gap
Yep.
that they have to find better ways. Easiest one in my world
Well,
is cooking. Like, if you
cooking.
don't know how to cook,
Right.
healthy people prepare a lot of their own food. Why? Because it's simpler and easier for you to stay on track with
Yep.
what works best for your body, not
Right.
just letting it McDonald's or someone else cook food for you.
Yeah. Well, going back to kind of the energy debt, there are 2 kinds of energy, actually, I think, within it also, right? There's this question of, where are you leaking energy? Not where are you spending it, but where is it leaking out? Those are also different, right? Some things cost
Mhm.
energy, but they're worth it.
Yes.
Putting my daughters to bed, coaching someone
Yeah.
through a breakthrough, recording a
Right.
podcast
Right.
like we're having today.
Right.
Those require energy, but they give something back. The
Yeah.
leaks
I'll
are,
throw one in on my end, is putting my daughter to bed.
yeah,
We
yeah,
read every single night. My wife has been instrumental. Amber has been instrumental in getting reading into our kids, all 4 kids. We would
awesome.
read 3 stories a night. That was the kind of the check that we had to do. So we've literally been reading to them for years. My wife reads to the younger 2 now. The older 2 are just, they're just older now. They don't want
Yep.
to sit on mom's story time, I guess. But the younger Maxwell and Emline will, and then Emline and I go to her room to read, and sometimes that turns into a 45-minute
You still
event.
there?
I'm
Yep.
reading myself to sleep. In
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
sense, I'm like, all
Yeah.
right, I gotta go, Carl. You need to go to sleep, and I'm falling asleep. So,
Right.
but
Right.
it's important.
Well, but then think about, even after you read, the leaks that come in after that, right?
Yeah,
The notifications that you missed, the
yeah,
meetings that you're
yeah.
still having that don't have a purpose, or just that building
Right,
resentment. Maybe it's that that perfectionism. But I think it really is all controlling things that aren't yours to control, right? And those don't really cost energy at the face value. They drain it, and they actually never refill the tank.
right.
And I think that's about where you need to start paying attention. You know, One exercise I love is ridiculously simple. For 1 week, don't track your calories, don't track your macros, don't even track your time, track your energy. Every
Right,
couple of hours, just ask yourself 2 questions. What just gave me energy, and what took energy away? And there's no judgment
right,
there. It's just
right.
data. Most of us know exactly where our time goes. Very
Hmm.
few of us actually know where our energy goes. And after a week of
Right,
doing that, you start to see patterns showing up.
right,
Maybe it's a certain client, maybe it's doom scrolling before bed. Maybe, as you said
right,
before, Brian, it's skipping lunch. Maybe it's never actually asking for help, or Maybe it's saying yes when you actually knew in your heart that you wanted to say no. And I actually think awareness creates options, and options end up creating that freedom as well. And one other thing I've learned is that energy is actually contagious, right? If I walk
Yeah.
if I walk into my house after a stressful day and I haven't processed any of it, my daughters feel it, my wife feels it. The dogs probably feel it. I don't have to say a word because energy walks into the room before I do. But the opposite is true. When I'm grounded, present, and genuinely there, people feel that also. Leadership also more broadly isn't just what you say, it's the emotional climate you create, whether it's at work, at home, really, it's everywhere.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I constantly have clients that said, just borrow my energy.
Yep. Yep.
I said, you will only know me as this version of Brian, of in quotations, Coach Brian. You will
Yep.
only know a high energy, optimism, glass half full, sun's always shining type mode, because that's what I have grown to do and be that leader in this specific area of life, because that's
Right.
why they're coming to me. I have to show up as the leader, and that's my identity, and there's energy that matches. But then
Right.
my wife gets to see the lower points of energy of just being tired, right? I am a human being. I only have I'm not the Energizer bunny, right? The battery does run
Yep.
out, and my kids and those closest to you in proximity end up obviously getting the brunt of
Yeah.
that. Now, certainly,
Well,
I
I
still
mean,
try and hold optimism, but you get wary at
that
times.
that that's important. People ask me all the time lately what leadership is from my perspective, and I'm honest. My answer has changed over the years. I used to
Of
think
course.
leadership was influence. Now, you just were talking about this. I think leadership is actually stewardship, right? It's taking
Yeah.
care of the people, taking care of the relationships, and taking
Right.
care of the energy you've been entrusted with, including your own. If you're constantly flaming out or running on fumes, you eventually don't have anything meaningful left to hand to the people you love most. And that's
Right.
too high of a price tag to pay for success.
I really agree with that. Very much so. And you have to find ways to recharge. Now, in your coaching and all, what are some powerful ways that people do recharge?
Yeah. Well,
That you get them to kind of check out of the day-to-day grind to check into their personal operating
yeah.
system, their ikigai.
A really simple one I'd love to leave our listeners with is, don't ask yourself, how can I be more productive?
Mm,
Ask yourself, where am I borrowing energy, as you kind of alluded to earlier, from tomorrow? Because that answer might be very quick to get to, number one, but it might change the trajectory of where you're heading.
hmm hmm It's so important to not constantly borrow from tomorrow, because it will catch up. That's been
Well,
Newton's what we're
that
saying.
bill comes due. That debt accumulates. That bill
Right,
comes
right.
due eventually, right?
And we'll say this. I remember Jim Carrey. I ended up watching a fair amount of motivational, personal, self care type shorts and such on YouTube or whatnot. And Jim Carrey said this of depressed is deep rest, that there is friction
Yeah,
against who you are and how you're showing up, and that energy debt is true, and that's where depression can come from in one source, not every source, but
right,
in some, and a lot of people, it's the feeling depressed is that you're not in alignment with your own energy operating system, and you then take deep rest because you are worn out, and humans
yeah,
cannot keep up with modern day pace of
right,
capitalism, of marketing, of branding, of all the things that are being advertised to you. It is lightning speed these days, especially with AI and this content factory, in a
yep,
sense of grabbing your attention, and that in and of itself is detrimental to you, just
yeah,
being caught in the attention trap of. I'll even tell my kids, please guys,
yep,
do not fall into living life 10 seconds at a time. You will wake up years from now with nothing.
Yeah.
with someone just trying to grab your attention
Yep.
and nothing to show as a result. And
Right.
oftentimes, like, so what do you watch? And just watch, and they can't even tell me anything that they just watched. Like, can you?
Right.
Oh, I don't just blah blah. It's like, no, no, seriously, this is
Right.
a very important part in life that you're going to have to manage. We all have to manage the rest of your life, is this attention of it, and it's going to drain your energy to do the things that you actually want to do, and then you might end up with depression and have to rest, deep rest, to be able to get out of it.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's a my first book is called Make Your Own Glass Half Full, and actually my
Yeah.
favorite chapter in it is about the allure of darkness, right? The
Mm.
allure of that negative. And that is a very, very, from both a leadership perspective, from the modern world that our children are growing up in, something that is continually trying to pull us in. And, a lot of people probably don't outwardly view it as darkness, but it's that downward negative cycle. And I equate it back to this fact. Imagine yourself, you're in your bed, you're in your room, it's completely dark. Last night, just as we did on this podcast, we lost power in the middle of the night. It actually was completely dark. And in terms of energy
Right.
and bringing it back into that energy debt, imagine you can't see anything, it's pitch black, and the power isn't necessarily out, but you need to go find a plug and then plug into an outlet to turn a light on to be able to navigate and see. That's what I
Mhm.
do in terms of my transformation leadership coaching. I'm the one who helps guide your hand to find that plug in the dark and plug
Yeah.
that light back in so that you can see once again.
Right.
Because, one other thing that I love to say is, it's Friday here in Boston. It's a little cloudy. I think it might thunderstorm later, but I know the sun is still up behind those clouds
Yeah.
somewhere,
I say the same thing. Like, if it's light outside, the sun's shining somewhere, just
right?
hidden behind clouds.
Well,
Yeah.
even if it's the middle of the night and the sun's on the other side of the world, that
Yep.
sun is still shining, right?
Yep.
So if it's
Mhm.
gray today, it's
We're
cloudy,
getting we're getting the sun from the moon, right? Shining,
but
the
it's like
reflection of the moon.
that idea that no matter how tough today is, you can actually improve, right? When you start to identify those leaks, recharge your battery,
Mhm.
it gives you that hope, and it kind of weaves back into the optimism that you mentioned earlier, right? I think people probably hear the word optimism and they make an assumption, right?
Right.
Optimism means pretending everything's okay, and that couldn't be further from what I believe. I actually wrote my book, Make Your Own Glass Half Full, because I wanted to reclaim that word. And, optimism isn't seeing the world through rose colored glasses. It's choosing to believe that your next decision still matters. And that's really it,
Mhm.
right? You don't have to know how everything works out. You don't have to fake being happy. You don't
Right.
need to ignore reality. I think real optimism starts by just, looking reality squarely in the face. It could be, this is hard, I'm tired, I'm overwhelmed, I'm grieving, I'm scared. And then it asks, okay, now what? And that question, now what? That's what I view as optimism, because you remind yourself that you still have agency and you still have autonomy.
Mhm. And agency is super important to be able to execute on a high level
Right.
of inner self-reliance to
Right.
be able to accomplish whatever goals you're trying to do.
Well, and I don't view the opposite of optimism as pessimism either. I actually think the opposite is helplessness, right? It's believing that nothing you do matters anymore, and that's where I worry a lot of men actually are today. They're carrying so much responsibility, they
Yeah.
stop believing they have choices. They feel trapped. Could be by work, could be by societal expectations, by finances, or even just by the version of themselves they think they're supposed to be. And another part of my work is just reminding people you still have choices, right? It's maybe not it's every
Power of
choice,
choice.
but enough to begin.
Yeah, power of choice. That's a huge undertone of what I introduce into my own curriculum with people. Is one of the first things. You have the power of choice. You're choosing what goes in your mouth. You're choosing how you're structuring your day and how you're managing your time and what you're doing with these things, or
Yep.
how much you say yes or no to in your day in terms of other obligations and whatnot. And
Yep.
we just want to make sure that we're in control of those opportunities so that you obviously again stay in
Yeah.
control and you are in
Well,
the driver's seat.
and when you start to see that choice, or, you know, when you start to ask that, it doesn't have to be big choices. They're actually usually
No,
much smaller than people
they
expect or
vary.
think they need to do. We love to talk about dramatic transformations.
Yeah,
We
right.
all love the I lost 100 pounds story, or I sold the company and, you know, made
Made all the
$1 billion,
money.
or I
Right.
quit my job. And life usually changes much more quietly than that, right? It starts
Yeah.
with drinking water before coffee. Maybe it's a 10-minute walk, putting your phone down during dinner, text the friend you've
Yeah.
been meaning to call, or saying no to one thing this week. Maybe
Right.
going to bed 30 minutes early or taking your actual vacation. None of those sound revolutionary, but they change the trajectory of your life because they change who you're becoming. Small
Yeah.
choices repeated constantly, that's how identities change. I saw a visual a few years ago in regards to this. Think about, so imagine you've got a plane that's flying from Los Angeles to New York. That's
Yep.
their original destination. If you change that simply like 1 or 2 degrees to a
1 degree. Yep.
different destination, you end up in a completely different place.
It's so funny. Yeah. I was like, oh, we're flying from New York to London. And how'd you end up in Morocco?
Right. Right.
A different continent.
Right. Well, and and
1% off and never course corrected.
and I think, one of my favorite quotes is from James Clear, who I think a lot of
Yep.
our listeners probably know.
Of course.
But it's every action is a vote for the kind of person you want to become. Right. I think about that
Hmm.
all the time. Every decision is either moving me toward the life I want or away from it. And it's not
Yep.
dramatically, it's gradually.
Yep. Very much so. This is constant course correction. Even the another principle is the 5 pound rule. And
Mm,
that's what I want my guys and anyone I ever work with to get into a 5 pound weight range for the
right,
rest of their life. And in that 5 pound weight range, it's very easy to manage and balance that out. As soon as we get to say having to lose 10 pounds, that's 4 to 8 weeks of effort,
right,
consistent effort that you have to do. Is whereas if you're trending up in your 5 pound weight range, you knock off the nonsense for 2 days and whatever you're trying to get away
yep,
with, and it goes right back down in the middle. Then you're like, okay, we're good.
right,
And but there has to be a constant self correction because life your body isn't static, your weight
right,
isn't static, you're a living being with inputs outputs from your energy needs and demands from food, but then all the things that we've been talking about internally too.
right, right. And, I think this actually ties to something I also genuinely sort of believe. In this country, we overlook the greatest assets we have. We celebrate, talk about small changes and where smaller moves are actually more important. We celebrate those billion-dollar companies, those
Of course.
unicorns, massive exits, huge valuations. And don't get me
Right.
wrong, the stories, they're inspiring. But I think we've convinced people accidentally that success only counts if it's massive, right? And
Right.
meanwhile, the businesses that actually hold our communities together are the ones we barely talk about. It could be
Right.
the neighborhood coffee shop, the therapist, the electrician, the gym, the family-owned restaurant, your photographer, your coach, music teacher,
Right.
but
You and I both.
it's the people who employ maybe 3 people instead of 3,000. Those are the businesses that create trust. It's
Right.
relationships, community, opportunity. They sponsor little league teams. They know your kids' names. They remember your coffee order. They create places where people actually belong. And that's not small, that's foundational. That's why I say micro is mighty, because I think we're going to rebuild healthier communities one relationship at a time. And, honestly, Brian, I think that's health too, right? We spend a lot of time
Yeah.
talking about nutrition. We don't spend enough time talking about belonging. Loneliness is one
Right.
of the biggest public health challenges we're facing.
Yep.
Some of the most,
The most connected ever,
yeah,
and
well,
we're
some of the
lonelier than
most
ever.
successful people I coach, and I'm sure you feel this too, are also some of the loneliest,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Calendars are full, phone is buzzing constantly, but they don't have people that they can exhale around, right? That
Right.
matters. Health
It does.
isn't only what's happening inside your body, it's what's happening between people.
Yeah, definitely. Social connections and we are relationship people. You
Right.
have to have community. You have to have connection, and it doesn't have to be big. It can be small. One,
Right.
two, three core people. I have my four amigos in a sense. I've got Dan, and he's my middle school
Yeah.
friend. I'm going to see him today in about 2.5 hours to work out. I've got Chris. He's a fellow father of middle school kids. Andy as well, and I work out or run with those guys. And then Leo's another high school friend that I
Yeah.
still keep in touch with pretty regularly. I'm actually trying to currently invite him as a guest on the show. He's an elite
Cool.
marathon runner and has a chiropractic business and different things that we can bring to the show. But those are the closest network of people, and then after that, people are just acquaintances.
Yeah. Yeah.
But those guys, all four of those guys are super busy. Literally everyone has 3 to 4 kids in my friend group. They're all of that teenish age, middle.
That's a
And
lot to
then
manage.
we
Yeah.
got, 3 of us are business owners.
Right.
So it's
Right.
it's constantly busy, but we have to schedule time and set it aside to spend time together. And that's what we do.
Well, and this is why, I mean, a lot of what I do in the world, I was really excited when I introduced you to Antenna Up, the
Yeah.
Marketing to Men Summit that's coming up in New York in September, and this Healthier Men at Work concept, because I think you and I, Brian, talk about the same thing from different directions. You know, you're helping men reclaim their physical health. I help them reclaim the internal operating system that allows that health to last. And I don't think those are separate conversations. I think they're the same conversation, but those events coming up connect people together. You know, Jana Merowitz Turner, who runs Antenna Up summits, she also has a thing called the Buoys Club that is trying to work around finding the buoys in our community that can work together. You and I are both white men in this world, right? We've been taught that we grind, we lean into ourselves, we'll find that happiness. That's not the truth. You have to find these connected webs of communities, and it's the magic that still exists on the internet that we can do this virtually. But you never know what alignment you can pick up when you start to maybe get yourself a little uncomfortable, but put yourself out there to what's in the center of that Ikigai exercise.
Right. No, I love it. And being open and vulnerable to those opportunities is so important. And then you can only do that, going back to the undertone of our whole conversation, is if you have energy, because you won't be able to pick it up if you're exhausted, tired, and fatigued. You need to be able to just see these opportunities and start to facilitate them. And relationships and all this meaningful work takes effort. It takes energy to do.
It really does. It truly does. Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. We've had a very powerful conversation about energy. I hope that the guys listening in.
It's ironic also, Brian, that I lost my power in the middle of it. That's I mean,
the irony
sometimes that's also something that we need to talk more about, right? Or the fact that our warts are the things that make us stronger. They build the calluses. They provide the armor that protects us when things get hairy, or those changes that are constant challenge us.
Right. Yeah, very much so. Losing power in the middle of conversation about energy.
I love the irony when you find it. Like, I mean, we persevered, right? We kept on going. So
now, what's one takeaway that you want to leave the guys with here through this conversation that is empowering, that gives them motivation to move into literally the next thing that they have to deal with in the day? Next challenge, obstacle, situation.
I'd love to leave them, Brian, with how much, stop asking how much more can I handle and start asking what kind of life am I building? Those are two completely different questions. One assumes life is something to survive. The other assumes life is something to design. And I think so many of us, as our conversation showed today, are incredibly good at enduring, but I want people to start flourishing instead. And if I could leave everyone with one challenge tonight before your head hits the pillow, don't ask yourself what you accomplished today. Ask 3 simple questions. What gave me energy today? What took energy away? And who got the best version of me? And if the answer to the last question is always your clients, your boss, or strangers on the internet, I would say it's probably time to make some changes, because the people you
Yes.
love, the people closest in your circle, most deserve your best energy, and so do you.
Right. Yeah. And you deserve to give it to them first and foremost,
Right.
and protect yourself in the other areas of
Right.
life. Yep. Very
Exactly.
good. Excellent. Where can we find you, Adam? And certainly all this will be in the show notes.
Yep.
What's the
Uh,
best leaving with? Your
the
podcast, all this stuff.
The easiest place to find me is at adamwbarney.com. So Barney like the dinosaur, or Barney Rubble,
Yeah.
depending on your age. I'm
Yeah.
also active on LinkedIn every day because I love continuing these conversations. You can also find my book, Make Your Own Glass Half Full, and my podcast is Anything Real. The book is available wherever books are sold. And
That's
honestly,
awesome.
whether somebody ever works with me or not, I just hope they leave today remembering your health isn't another project to manage. It's the foundation that every part of your life is built on. So protect it, invest in it, and don't wait for a crisis to start paying attention to it. The
Yes.
healthiest version of you isn't good, isn't just good for you. It's a gift, I think, to everyone who gets to do life with you.
Yeah. Very much so. Very powerful. Thank you, Adam, and everyone else. Now, listening in, energy is finite. Everyone has the same amount of time, 24 hours, but you have different capacities for energy. And it's really important for you to be able to show up when you need to, set specific time aside to rest and have downtime to then be able to repower, recharge, whether that most importantly is sleeping an appropriate amount of time, taking 10 minutes after a really busy, high priority meeting to stop and be able to process what happened and not just jump into the next thing. That's so important to be able to have a little bit of a time gap, especially if you are a meeting heavy person. You have to stop and think and collect yourself.
Yep.
And then eating the right food, because food is literally energy to your body, and moving your body is literally energy in your body. And so we have to have those as core components of your everyday life to take care of yourself. And for the love, we'll just throw it in there. Drink some water. Please, OP. Like, hydrate yourself, because that will also give you energy, right? Think of it like
I
this:
I need
water
to go.
is conductive, right? It's
I
conductive.
need
So,
I need to go refill my water cup in this 100 degree space that
yeah, yeah, you're
I'm in. Yeah.
sweating over there. So, consider your energy. Don't be in debt, because it will cost you, and we don't need that. Okay.
Yeah.
Everyone, thanks for joining in for this episode of Driven for Health.